All right, we ready, Frankie? Yeah, all right, hi. So we have Deirdre Lester.
Hi.
Deirdre is the CRO, the Chief Revenue Officer of Barstool Sports. Deirdre's been here since 2018.
Yeah.
I feel like you've been here 10 years
It feels
with
like
me.
a long time, yeah. And it feels like a minute at the same time.
It's a minute and a lifetime sentence.
Yeah.
But I think for people listening to this, you will be a very eagerly anticipated conversation, which is awesome. Give a sense, just give some perspective on, A, what you did before, B, what being a CRO is like at Barstool Sports, and then let's start with like what it was like when you got here versus where we are now.
Cool. Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to be here on the Token CEO podcast.
It's actually nice.
I don't know why it took me almost a year to get invited, but here I am.
Large line of complaints on that.
Yeah, so I've been in digital sports media for the most part, my entire career, always in digital media. So since, I don't want to date myself too much, but like before the year 2000, I've been doing this in some capacity or form at some kind of leading edge digital media company. And that's been my, if I look back at where I've gone in my track record, for the most part, with a few exceptions, and where I've had the most success has been at companies that are sort of always been at the leading edge of the digital media forefront. And then, primarily in sports.
And okay, so I will never forget one of my meetings with Deirdre. So I met Deirdre through a mutual friend, and then there was a recruiter who was like, you need to meet Deirdre, and met Deirdre in the office. And then I had a second meeting with Deirdre in Grand Central. Do you remember our meeting in Grand Central?
Yes.
Deirdre had the best outfit on. She had like leather pants. She looked great. I think I was like hungover and like stressed. And I just remember being
really, really interesting about that meeting. That was literally the day that it was announced that ESPN was canceling Barstool Fan Talk.
That might have been
so
it.
you might have been a little like frenzied, and because I don't think you were expecting that before our meeting. And I think I also was coming out of like back-to-back meetings, and on my cab ride to Grand Central, I was like, "Oh, I should probably check like Barstool and Twitter and see what's going on." And like,
I think like, you're right. That's so funny. I forgot about that. Those were some dark days. But anyways, so I liked Deirdre instantly. I thought she had everything that we were looking for. We've moved so fast at this company, it's hard to remember what it was like when you started. We were at HQ2. How many sellers do you think we had? Like 5?
Less than 5.
Yeah. And we were doing, I don't think we were in double digits. Do you think we were in double digits?
We were in double digits, double digits.
Double digits, okay.
When I came, I remember being really excited because you were there already, and I had worked previously at a startup that when I started had no revenue at all yet. And so the path from getting from 0 to 10 is like an enormous lift.
Yep.
So I was actually like, this is exciting. They've already done some of the hard stuff. Well, some of the hard stuff. Yeah, but it was exciting at that point.
And describe what surprised you, or just describe what it was like back then.
Yeah, I mean, it's intimidating coming into Barstool from the outside in. And then what was not surprising, but really refreshing was like, from the moment I walked in the door, I felt so embraced by everyone, so welcomed. Again, I don't know that I felt surprised by that, but a lot of people were always asking me that first year, like, what's it like to be at Barstool? What's it like to work with Erika and Dave, or meeting all the talent that so many people look from the outside in and are starstruck by? And at Barstool, it's just like we were basically in like 2 rooms together at that point, and all on top of each other all the time. So it was so great. And I think I came in, my first day I came in, you were doing your previous years, like all hands meeting, and going into the Christmas party at the Gem Saloon. And I came with you guys.
Brett Merriman
and
Christmas
I remember
party.
just being like, everyone's so great and so nice. And like Rhea and Fran were trying to get me to come to the bar and do shots with them.
You did come, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And I just remember just going home that night and being like, not that you ever second guess yourself, but it was like the greatest decision to come here.
That's fun. Awesome. And then describe how much you think we've changed.
Oh my God, tremendously. I mean, when I came to Barstool, again, I had worked in sports media, right? ESPN, Major League Baseball, a bunch of startups, Rivals.com. And I came here because I'd done that before. And Barstool was, again, pushing the envelope, sports, lifestyle, but still was predominantly male focused, right? I mean, Rhea and Fran were really the only female talent when I joined, and Casey, who had just joined, and Liz. but that was really new. I think about how diversified we've become, both like female and all the new talent we're bringing in from all different areas of interests, different sports, different areas of lifestyle. It's just amazing how far we've come from that point. And the number of people we've gone, I think we were under 70 employees then, and we're over 250 now. So huge trajectory of growth in terms of people. There's people upstairs right now that I don't recognize. So I think there's a lot of new people that have been hired during a pandemic, so it's hard to get to know everybody as quickly, but so much change. And then I think, on the advertising sales front, when I joined, one thing that was surprising and cool for me, because I like to always be learning new things, was the advertising revenue that was happening here was primarily audio driven. It was a lot of direct response advertisers, D2C brands that were emerging that really caught on early to the podcast medium and were investing across the Barstool network. There weren't a lot of blue chip advertisers. Anheuser-Busch was probably the big exception at the time. And we've changed that a great deal. And yet still those emerging brands, those disruptor brands are still so much a part of the fabric of what we've done. But we've been able to move them from not just being podcast advertisers, but to be broader with us across everything we do, which is the focus.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. It's hard to think back almost, where if you think about in 2018, you're right. We were a third of the size, less than a third of the size of that we are now. We had, I would say less than half the talent we have now, less than half of the business infrastructure. And it's so, I think one of the things that's so breathtaking and hard and awesome about this company is that, and I've appreciated it about working with you, is that we've changed so much almost every 6 months.
Yeah.
There's a new medium, there's a new personality, there's a new format. And I think it's hard sometimes to be at the top of the heap and responsible for driving revenue when the sand underneath you is just shifting all the time and the pile is growing. And so one thing I would love for you to just talk about is describe being a CRO. And also how your job as a CRO is different than a CRO maybe at a more traditional company.
Yeah. So, for anyone that's listening that doesn't know what that means, and it probably varies from company to company, but I primarily focus on the advertising relationships, the brand partnerships, and then those brand partnerships that then sometimes become brand licensing partnerships. I'm not overseeing the e-commerce revenue necessarily, so not truly all across all revenue streams, which at some companies that role might be, but it's really that growth on the ad and sponsorship piece that I'm focused on. What it's like at Barstool, we've been on such a crazy trajectory of growth. To your point, we're constantly testing new mediums, we're constantly bringing in new talent, new personalities, or the existing people here are launching new shows and coming up with new ideas. So, it's a constantly changing landscape here, which is exciting. I think there's people at other media companies that are starved for something new to take to market. It's actually one of the more challenging things at another company as a if you're in that salesperson role, where how do you get your client to take more meetings when you really don't have anything different to say than the meeting you had 6 months ago? I remember that from some of the larger media companies I'm at, sometimes you're reinventing the narrative just for the sake of being able to go in and sell something new to get the meeting with the partners. We literally are there's so much. We have a hard time bringing it all to market fast enough, and fast isn't a thing here. We like to move really fast. The content team moves really fast. You move really fast. So we're always trying to move really fast as well. Advertisers aren't always as fast to move, and that can be a frustration for folks internally, not necessarily knowing all those processes out externally. It's super fun. There's been one of the things that struck me when I came here is my LinkedIn became a thing that I could no longer service on a day-to-day basis. I love LinkedIn. A lot of people don't know this, but I actually took a 3-year break off the industry and took a step back from my career to become a mom. And when I came back in, I was like, thank God for LinkedIn, or I would have never kept all those business cards that used to sit on a Rolodex on my desk. And when I came to Barstool, it just exploded with like everyone I'd ever talked to in my career and life wanted to like find a way and to connect to Barstool. Yeah. Every college kid that could find me on LinkedIn, and I know that this is across the company, was trying to make a connection. And it just struck me like how big the brand is, and it's, you know, all the way from like my contemporaries, my peers, down to like every kid in college today, and then all across in between. So that's exciting. It can be overwhelming too. I know you and I have talked about we can't help every college kid in America get an internship. So yeah, I mean, it's just been electric. Yeah. And the one thing I would say is, you know, the media industry, companies don't necessarily grow at the clip we're growing in our sector, right? You know, the big platforms, some of them do, but in terms of publishers right now, I'm hearing a lot of like difficulty. And I think that the fact that even in a pandemic year, we grew 30% year over year in advertising revenue, I think we're bucking a lot of trends, and it's exciting. And one of the things I see at Barstool is that our problems are very unique and we're trying to solve them. And when I go externally and look for peers or advice, I can't get answers from anyone because our problems are just very unique to us. Yeah. But I do hear consistent problems across the industry that we don't necessarily have to the degree that others have.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I had a call. We've hired a consultant on like the pricing yield front, and so I had a call with them today. I think they talked to you yesterday. Yeah. And they're like, who are your contemporaries? And I literally was like, honestly, like, don't waste my time. It's, you know, they're like, is it Refinery 29? Is it Vice? Is it Complex? And I'm like, it's Charlie D'Amelio, Courtney Holt at Spotify. Yeah. You know, like, I'm like, don't look for the box because the box doesn't exist. You know, one of the interesting things that's happening in the ad business right now is Google announces that they're getting rid of cookies. Right. And what's that going to mean? And we're so interesting as a digital media company because we're just not dependent on display and programmatic as our means of monetization. And I say that, and if you're not in the media business, you won't really care. But if you're in the media business, and in particular in the digital business, that is so fucking radical. Yeah. And I think one of the things, you know, that people don't really appreciate, like I was saying this to the Penn guys yesterday, is that, you know, we were looking at the year over year numbers on podcasts. And I was like, look, like, you know, podcasts are being impacted by sports, and podcasts are being impacted by the lack of commute. And I'm like, the other big impact, though, is that a year ago or 2 years ago, or when you got here, Instagram was photos. And now Instagram is photos, it's videos, it's stories, it's reels, it's long form. And that's not just on Instagram. That's on every single platform you can imagine. So just the proliferation of like the outlets to which content can go are changing so fast. You look at Clubhouse, right? Like everybody's all hot and bothered on Clubhouse. Now Twitter has created the Clubhouse competitor. So that's two places where people can go to be live and have a moderated conversation. So I think in your job, you know, I think one of the things that has gone so well here is the introduction of brand advertisers, right? Like that was really, when you look at the hallmark of what you've done with Barstool, like that will be a massive hallmark. The second is just the nature of long-term strategic partnerships, which, you know, for us, we were working more tactically. We were on a campaign by campaign basis, or we were living and dying by the conversion of somebody else's product. I think one of the biggest ways we've evolved as a company, like we had a huge meeting this week in the alcohol space, is that, you know, we are kind of done renting. Like you look at the announcement of Dave's ETF, you see the impact that we've had. You know, Penn's market cap has gone from $2 billion to $20 billion since we did our partnership. Like we're kind of done renting is kind of how Dave and I talk about it. And I really believe that, which is we can push anything and but if it feels like our own, and if partners feel really deeply integrated, Deirdre, for folks listening, was like instrumental with Gallo in New Amsterdam and the launch of Pink Whitney. But I think it's really interesting for us, and for you in particular, of having a job of monetizing across all this stuff, which is changing constantly, let alone our goat rodeo of creators and shows and brands. And then also the desire to move to things that we feel more in control of and more invested in. And I think, one of the things that's hard is, I think it's a hard job being a salesperson. I think that, which I want to talk about for a little bit. Like, one is everyone and their fucking mother thinks that they can sell something better than you. Like, that's just the nature of things. Everybody thinks they're great at sales.
It's always been that way. So
that's in life. That's not a Barstool thing.
But yes.
In life. And then the second thing is, but nobody wants to pick up the phone and make the cold call and get rejected 900 out of 901 times on what you're selling. So I've always felt like a loyalty to salespeople by virtue of like how hard that is. I also, I'm the first person to be like, we can do it better. We can do it different. We can accelerate this. But what do you think made you a great seller, and what makes great sellers, do you think, now or here?
Yeah, I think, great question. I think if I'm thinking about myself over the years coming up in sales, and that's really where I came from. It's like I started as the Daniela to the VP of sales at CNET, and then just kind of worked my way through the ranks in sales. In fact, I was, not part of the actual sales team, and they were doing like a pitch contest because CNET was all like former print people that were into pitch contests. And I raised my hand as like the little assistant and said, could I ever participate in the pitch contest? So I think, a willingness to put myself out there, not afraid to go out on a limb, and then also competitiveness. Like, I love competitive environments. I grew up in sports. I grew up 2 brothers. I was always competitive with them. I think if you're not competitive, you won't survive in sports because it is literally a horse race. And, every day you win and lose. And, if you get defeated by rejection, you're not going to succeed in sales. So you're right. Like, everybody thinks they can be a salesperson until they have to repeatedly do it over and over with the wins, the highs of the wins and the losses, the impact of those losses, how that impacts you emotionally and takes away your motivation can make or break you as a salesperson. And that has been consistent everywhere I've gone. I've managed teams at a lot of different companies, all different types of personalities, and some people just very quickly realize like this isn't for me and move on, and other people like they just can't, once they're on the racetrack, they can't get off of it. I still love that, and I think that I love participating and being really close. I like to be out in the field, talking to customers, being part of the deal making, even on some of the smaller partnerships, because I get really excited about the newer partners coming in and our ability to make them big partners over time. But yeah, it's not for everybody. At the same time, everybody, you always hear the saying like we're all salespeople in our lives, we're selling ourselves. But there's something different about a sales job where you have an actual target on your back and you're trying to hit a number, and there's all these opposing forces and pressure. And I think we have a lot of that going on here at Barstool, more now as we've gotten bigger than ever. You think about, what we're doing. We have a very aggressive growth goal as an overall company, and our advertising revenue is such a big part of that. Each seller, then that trickles down. Each sales team has a goal, and each individual has their own goal that they have to achieve, and they're getting bigger every year by a lot. So their focus is to hit their goal, and yet we have a lot of people to keep happy, both you obviously and Dave, but also all the different personalities, everybody that wants to monetize their content because they feel that if their content is monetized, then they're having success here. And it's just, for everybody that you're making happy one day, you're sort of feeling like you're letting somebody down. And it's a constant balance of that. Salespeople tend to gravitate towards the things that, one, drive the most revenue, so probably have the most audience. And then they also tend to gravitate towards the things that have consistently worked for them and are going to cause the least amount of disruption with their client relationships. So they're going to be effective at driving sales or, effective advertising for their customers.
This is sales sells what's easy, which is true. They
sell
what
what's
makes their
easy,
clients
what
happy.
They know works, what's worked in the past. And then,
which anyone would do, I think, if you had a number
or
on
the
your
folks
back.
that are eager and
Yeah.
seem very willing. That's another factor. Even some of the newer talent that come in, it's just like how they talk about brands and advertising and wanting to partner with sales versus the people who maybe, either just don't engage with us at all, and so they then are just not top of mind, or they haven't executed well in the past, and so there's an assumption that they won't again, and people are averse to that risk. So that's a little bit about what goes into like the day-to-day sales here at Barstool.
How do you, I think one of the things that you've hit on is somebody's always mad, right? Like a talent's always mad, a customer's always mad. Like you and I are all like, somebody's always mad.
Yeah.
And you have the added challenge of just a very public vocal company. When Dave's mad about the monetization of the Dave Portnoy show, it's not you, me, and Dave talking about it. The internet is talking about it. So how do you keep your cool? How do you keep perspective? And how do you help your team in that environment?
Yeah. I mean, Dave's very unique in that he is, he's Dave. He can say whatever he wants about anything that's happening inside this company. That's his prerogative. At the end of the day, I also know that he knows the overall results, right? So I know that, and I think the sales team knows this as well, that ultimately he knows how much revenue is coming in, how much success we're having, but he's not going to miss. Like, he's just super perceptive, and he's not going to miss when people do stupid things or fuck something up. So,
and he's a great storyteller of when people do stupid
and
things.
I get crazy. It frustrates me. Like Dave's a perfect example. He walks around carrying a certain coffee cup, 7 days a week, whenever he has coffee in his hand. And then if we get a coffee sponsor, no one thinks to go down and like have a conversation with him about it and make sure he has the product for when he's going to be doing the ad read. So here we have him on I think episode 1 or 2 of the Dave Portnoy show, reading an ad read for a coffee brand with a Starbucks cup in front of him. And he's like, what is wrong with you people? And that's just an oversight. It's partly,
does that make you scream?
Yeah, it makes me crazy.
I actually was thinking before Deirdre got in here, I was like, I got to clean off my fucking desk because Deirdre is going to be like, this brand, that brand, this brand.
Hide exactly. Shout out New Balance. I did wear my New Balance for the Token CEO podcast. But no, it does make me crazy because I think we can always improve and do better, and it's not reflective of the overall body of work that's being done. But it also demonstrates how fast we're going, how fast we're moving, and how hard it is to be perfect in that kind of environment.
Yeah. I think that, it's so interesting in this conversation this morning. I was trying to explain to the consultants where I'm like, look, we've just grown so fast that we haven't been able. There are companies that will go into something with a plan and a process and things are prescriptive, and then there's companies that have just blown the doors off of everything. And I think we've blown the doors off of everything. I think we've built processes. I think this place, I think we're kind of the way I was describing it is we're one of the smartest companies you've ever met, and we're also so fucking dumb. Simultaneously, one breath to the next. But I think one of the hardest things about this is it's hard to build process when you're moving at a breakneck speed. And it is hard to, as anybody who's in sales knows, it's hard to, 30% growth off of a $40 million base is one thing. 30% growth off a $120 million base is yet another. And
right.
One of the things that I'm always thinking about is what is the infrastructure we have to build? We're so fortunate in that we're a company that doesn't have legacy, which I want to talk about a little bit. You come from mostly digital companies, but ESPN has a lot of legacy. MLB has a lot of legacy. I came into Barstool when there was really nothing. So but now I'm fighting our legacy from 5 years ago, which I think is It hit me this week.
Well, also legacy on the other side of things is like, I think you and Dave, that over the summer, the words industry standard became like a t-shirt here because we don't conform to anybody's industry standard. And when that word got thrown at one of our talent, we kind of turned it into sort of a joke. I think about that a lot. Like there's a lot of industry standards in the media business that we don't conform to. And sometimes it makes things seem a little harder, but it's why we work harder for our partners. I'll give you a good example. Right now, we're dealing with an advertiser that's frustrated because within the podcast industry, they like for the hosts to all personally endorse the brands that they represent. And we tend to do that for the most part. But when the language is as prescriptive as I did this and
must personally endorse. Yeah.
And I, set this up in my own kitchen and it, I love the way it tastes, and the person reading that hasn't actually used the product or they know what it is, but it's not authentic to them in their life. That actually is something that I'm like, maybe this industry standard that has been around for the last few years needs to just evolve a little bit, like be open-minded versus like coming down on us for not doing it exactly the way you expected it to be done, because it still works, and so I think one of the things is like we buck a lot of trends, and I think that makes us perform better for advertisers, but it also means we have to describe ourselves differently, and we don't always fit nicely in everybody's box. I mean, you think about an advertiser's buying across a lot of different places. They might be buying Spotify, they might be buying Barstool, they might be buying ESPN or some other more legacy media company. And our offering, our ad products don't always like match up to what everybody else is offering a standard.
Yeah, they're all offering the same thing.
And we're doing something different. And we're even pushing further in that direction to be less standard. So that can be challenging. And then legacy was when I first came to Barstool. I remember, an advertiser talking to me about legacy pricing, and I'm like, there's no legacy here. Like, what are you talking about?
We're making the rate card as we speak.
So there is, and the bigger media companies have a harder time innovating. It's like the biggest problem in media, right? Is because they have to protect those legacy media streams while trying to be innovative and emergent on new platforms and not chip away at but with what's happening, like the tectonic plates are finally really moving on the TV side. So I will be curious to see what that means for digital as well.
What do you think our greatest differentiator is in market? Like you talk to customers all the time, you talk to advertisers all the time. Like what do you think it is that differentiates?
I think it depends on, like, to your point about who's our competitive set, depends on who we're being compared to, for sure. There's a few things that really struck me when I was coming here that still resonate today is like the talent, how the talent are part of Barstool versus we're not a network of influencers that all live separately and we're basically repping them. There's a lot of that going on in the world because there are so many like cool influencers out there, some of them who have amassed huge following, but it's a Wild West world. Here you've got the talent are here, they're part of Barstool, they're committed to growing the Barstool brand and their brands within that environment. I think that's really unique. I don't really see that going on anywhere else. I think the audience feel real, like they're real people versus impressions, so everyone else is selling impressions and we're selling people. And that translates when you look at our e-commerce revenue and even just, we constantly are asking the e-com team for stats on like, tell us how that like new line of St. Patty's Day merch sold, because that's a salient point we can take to an advertiser. Like our people come to us and they buy our stuff, and if you're the right fit for our audience, they'll buy your stuff too, because if our people get behind it, our audience will get behind it. I just think that's really unique today.
What is your biggest frustration? Like, what do you think the biggest obstacle in front of you is?
The misperceptions of Barstool Sports that come with a company that grew up on the internet and has a history and has made mistakes in the past or said things that, today when they're brought to light maybe don't sound great or don't hold up in today's environment, but that people kind of gravitate towards old headlines versus like what we've become, what we've built. You and I've dealt with that so much, but it's something that it just takes time to overcome, and it slows us down, and then it constantly rears its head. But that said, I think that the trajectory we've been on the last 12 months has been remarkable, and I think more and more people are seeing that. So that's probably the biggest one that holds us back.
And what do you think's holding brands back? Like, what do you see happening in advertising in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of things. I mean, I think the platforms are taking up 80% of the overall digital ad revenues, and people are still clinging to old traditional forms of media like cable TV, and like things like Nielsen ratings that really still to this day don't make any sense to me. And then, I think, people are afraid to take risks, particularly in the current environment, more and more so. And with risk comes reward. So it's like a financial investment, right? Higher risk, higher reward, lower risk, lower reward. People are buying a lot of, just audience out there, but not with any real backup that there's actual people behind the audience.
And what do you look for? What do you look for on your team? Like, what's the DNA that you like? Like, what do you think makes a great, like, I think we're the network of the future, right?
Yeah.
Where it's untethered, it's unwired. We're going to be, on every platform where we can find audience. And we're going to create advertising opportunities for brands. We're going to create commerce opportunities. We'll create product opportunities. And then most importantly, we're going to create content that resonates in that environment. As you think about people who have to, make the money go round, sales makes the world go round. What is it you look for in people?
Right now, and ever since I got here, diversity of background, right? So people who have there's so many different aspects of this industry, different publishers, different agencies, sports marketing, female brands. We need a group that's super diverse because of how quickly the company is diversifying. And then we need people who are, I don't necessarily think that every salesperson or person who works in the sales organization needs to be a stoolie, but they need to have the passion for the Barstool brand and be creative, because a lot of what we're doing requires like an innate creativity. We're not the creatives. We're always going to rely on the content folks to come up with the creative, but to be able to think on the fly and speak creatively to brands and help them understand and envision how they can come into this world, I think is important. Because again, we're not just selling the spots and dots. We're actually integrating brands into the content in a way that no one else does. And so to be able to articulate that to brands with an enthusiasm and passion and belief that it works, I think that's something that, I see it. I interview folks and, some of them have done their homework. They've read a few articles about us, and others are quoting their favorite episode of, Call Her Daddy or whatever show they love, and coming with an idea. And I think having ideas and bringing ideas to the table is key.
So let's talk about Call Her Daddy for a second. So how do you, it's actually funny. I had a call with the Chernin guys the other day, and we were talking about OnlyFans, and, Peter Chernin is like, oh boy, OnlyFans. And I'm like, you know what? OnlyFans is not that different than Barstool Sports when I got here. I mean, it is, but it isn't. But look at how much we've evolved in 5 years. OnlyFans is going to evolve in the next 5 years, right?
Of course. I mean, Snapchat was a sexting platform.
Completely. Snapchat, TikTok, it's fascinating. So, but how do you, one of the things that you have the responsibility for is that, I think one of our biggest differentiators is just that it's real. The audience is real. The product is real. Our personalities are real. You send Kevin Clancy trotting out, on 7th Avenue, you're going to get the same guy who's on air here.
Yeah, it's authentic.
It's authentic. With that, they say the F word. They talk about Gluck Gluck. They are, lambasting somebody here who did something stupid. So how do you think about making brands comfortable with that? Because I think that's very often, you guys have to thread this needle, which I think people don't appreciate. I don't think any sales team is perfect. I don't think any person is perfect. I don't think we get it right 100% of the time. There is something to be said for the way that we've grown as a company and the way that we have grown. I think we have something like, how many brand partners do we have here? We have thousands.
Advertisers.
Like,
I think there's probably
I think there's
point at which you
1,500
delineate from-
advertisers who work with this company. There was
how many?
10?
Yeah.
5?
Yeah.
10? There weren't 10, actually. There was probably like 7 when I got here. But anyways, all of that said, so you guys have this unique challenge where you're trying to thread this needle.
Yeah.
You're trying to you're trying to make money. You're trying to get a brand to be comfortable being in a story that you don't control. And then you're trying not to get yelled at by the talent for being like, what the fuck is this product? I don't understand this product. Or worse, they're butchering the read or so how do you do that?
It's and I think where I sit, I empathize with all sides, right? I've worked with advertisers my whole career. I empathize with them and look, a lot of times we're dealing with a big company and the brand manager on a particular product that we're working with, they care about their brand, but there might be, layers and layers and layers above them to even get to the CMO. So they want to just make sure that they do the right thing for their brand, but also they don't risk losing their job, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that I think about when it comes to our advertisers and the reason why they're trepidatious about sometimes working with a company that is more edgy and kind of says things that make people uncomfortable. I think though, going back to your question, if I look at it as suitability, so brands have been preached to over the last 5 years or so. I can kind of remember where I was when the news broke that Google and YouTube were monetizing terrorist videos. It was awful. It was all over the news and cover of every newspaper. And then the whole publisher industry tried to jump on that as a way to attack Google, which was we're brand safe. And you need to be in a brand safe environment. It wasn't a new term that no one had ever talked about before, but it became the industry's obsession. And so then we kind of, as a brand who don't play it safe very often or at all, we get put in this penalty box that we have to get ourselves out of, right? And I think one of the things that is important is that the brands understand who their consumers are. You and I have walked out of meetings kind of I don't think they know who their consumer is if they think that Barstool people aren't the target consumer, right? And so I think, there's a spectrum of where people can be comfortable, and trying to get to what that means is always a conversation, and we try not to not have that conversation, but rather address the elephant in the room and get a feeling for okay, if people saying shit and F words are going to make you seriously uncomfortable and you think, then we're not suitable for you and you're not going to be suitable for us. So let's not spend the next takes a long time to get ad deals done. It's months and it's a lot of work. And every minute we spend doing something there, we're not doing something else. So I look at it as time spent also. If there's a lack of suitability right out of the gates, then let's get to a fast no rather than a long slow maybe. And try to get to the decision makers and have real conversations there. There again, someone's dropping the F-bomb in the rundown next to an ad read or even in the ad read is very different than sponsoring something that's sexually explicit at times, Call Her Daddy. We just have to figure out where on the spectrum your brand is suitable, and then we'll put you where you want to be. Now, Call Her Daddy is a unique anomaly unto itself because it's female and it's female empowerment in a way that people are not
dressed
used
up in
to
raunchy
seeing.
sex. Yeah.
But it's funny. A lot of our guys talk like that too. It's just not seen as so salacious because it's not a woman saying those things. So I actually love being in a boardroom. I had a friend actually ask me what's it like when you're in a room and you have to pitch Call Her Daddy? I'm there's nothing more fun than that. Because I think coming from me, maybe it's unexpected.
Yeah.
And,
well, you're also unexpected in pitching Barstool.
I mean, I love the brand, and at the same time, when I was coming here, a lot of people were wow, you're going to go to Barstool? That seems a little crazy because of all the other places I've been. But no, I think that it's really, you have to believe in the brand, and you have to really pay attention to what the talent and the audience care about, and then be convincing with your partners about these are the people you really need to reach and
Yeah.
influence, because
Yeah.
they'll move the needle for your
Yeah.
brand. And the other thing I'll say about brand safety is, like, a really good brand manager knows that brand safety means making sure that young people know about my brand and
Yeah.
care about my
Yeah,
brand,
that's right.
because otherwise we are just on our way to extinction
Yeah.
or irrelevance. And so I love having that conversation versus,
Yeah, the like
I don't want
teetotaling.
my brand next to, like,
Yeah, it's so
bad
funny.
words.
It's a really good. I mean, we work with. There's a company in San Francisco where, and you and I've had this conversation with people a lot, but I find it fascinating. I think one of the biggest risks for brand marketers right now, CPG companies, payment companies, financial services companies, automotive companies, retailers, is that the makeup of the marketing department, your marketing starts to reflect the composition and makeup of your marketing team. And we've been through this a lot, whereby if you are looking at your customer and your customer eats at your fast food chain, or your customer buys your car, or you want a customer to use, your coupon product, you've got to understand what that customer cares about, what that customer values, and what that customer is comfortable with. And that isn't in and of itself uniform, right? There's multiple customer sets, blah, blah, blah. But I think one of the things that's happening is, in marketing right now, there is this desire to reflect. It's very virtuous. It's a desire to be progressive. It's a desire to be inclusive. It's a desire to be diverse, which are all really good things, and things that I'm for. But what's interesting is that at some point that creates a rub, and it creates an alienation. You can be progressive, inclusive, and diverse and still speak to your customer in a way that doesn't alienate your customer. And I think that one of the biggest things that's happening is that tension, almost, because I think marketing is by and large becoming more ineffective because there's a bigger saturation on Google and Facebook and YouTube, right? There's more competition, and there's an increase in price, which is creating a decrease in yield. I think the second thing is television is like dead. So your dollars, which you used to have a nice, neat little formula for that just made you feel good as a marketer, isn't working. And then the third thing is the advent of influencer marketing and podcasts means, like, you're with the people. Like, Joe Rogan is talking about whatever Joe Rogan wants to talk about today. Dave Portnoy is talking about whatever he wants to talk about today. And you've got to decide, do you have the balls to be in that? And I think there's a tension in all of that. I also think you're seeing companies that are choosing their own commitment to being organic, let's say, right? Like, that's not controversial. Being organic. Sometimes your consumer doesn't give a shit about being organic. They just want cheap beer, or you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it's like, so how do you, do you see that?
Yeah, I do. I think, I also see, like, within larger companies that we've worked really hard. There's so many stakeholders. We have to do a lot of different meetings to get to yes. A lot of times what I'm seeing in those larger companies is they are reflective of society, which is, like, pretty divided. So while half of the group wants to work with, us, another half of the group wants to go do something in the, like, health and wellness category. And maybe they should be doing a little bit of both and spreading their message around a little bit more. I don't know. But there's definitely, like, the more people you have to convince, the more likely it is they don't agree.
Yeah, and then
because,
it's like
people
marketing by
agree.
committee, which then you're dead. But yeah, I think it's so interesting. Like, I think it's very interesting because I think it's almost like you have to start with the question, like, this was my NWHL thing, is like, do you want more fans, or do you want more fans of a certain type? Right. You gotta answer that question. You want everybody? Do you want a lot? You want to make a lot of money? Do you want a lot of eyeballs? Do you want a big broadcast deal? Or do you want a certain profile of fan? One answer isn't right, one answer isn't wrong, but you have to decide that.
Yeah. It was interesting because when we first started expanding our female brands, it was something that struck me was, people were comparing us, like, well, what would you compare yourselves to? And I looked at all the other kind of digital female focused media properties, and it was like Refinery 29, Pop Sugar, those guys, and they're all very aspirational is one way to put it, but not necessarily inclusive to everyone.
It's like you should be eating avocado toast and we're doing yoga.
Yeah, exactly. And
and our girls are like work at a frat house.
There are the girls that work in fashion and go to One Oak, and then there are the girls who work elsewhere and go to the Gem Saloons type of place on the weekends with their girlfriends to meet regular guys, and like that's who our audience was to me at the time. Struck me, whether it was with Chicks in the Office or Call Her Daddy, it was like the real girls. And I feel like there's more of them, so if you want to reach them, like you got to figure out what they're listening to, what they care about, and I think that's across pretty much all of our content.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Where do you think, like, what's next for us, in your opinion? Like, what are you fired up about?
I'm fired up about a lot of things. I think, one of the things that's exciting right now is, it's exciting to me. I don't know if it's exciting to everybody, but the fact that we're pushing the envelope on podcasts as an audio only medium to podcasts as, a 360 medium with emphasis on video. I don't think anybody else in the market's looking at it that way, and we're seeing a lot of, we just rolled out a new ad product that's completely unique to us that incorporates not only an audio-only ad product, but also video that has a visual element, an interactive element, and the response from advertisers has been really phenomenal. So that's exciting. I think that getting back to experiential would be really nice, because I think one of the things that we do really well is bring our fans together, and when partners see that, they get very excited, and it gives them a little bit of like up close and personal with who are the fans. Obviously the Classic is getting going, and the Barstool Classic, and we did 14 golf events last year. I went to a handful of them this year, where no one in this industry is going to get together. Meetings are sort of off the books for the foreseeable future, is what I'm hearing from the buying side. The fact that we have now almost 27 events on the calendar, I'm excited to kind of get out and get some customers to those events, because they're pretty premium. We can use them as hospitality, and then people also get to see the Barstool experience. So that to me is exciting. There's just so much going on. But getting back to a bit of normalcy. I don't know if you know this, but they announced today in New York that you can have gatherings of up to 200 people. So I think we can tell our employees to come back.
Fuck it. Texas is like, fuck it, we're done.
Everybody's following their
Texas
leads,
wants to be
sorta.
Florida. Wow, you can have gatherings in New York?
Outside. Whoa.
All right, let's go.
Someone's roller skating.
Oh, so that's perfect for our new front.
Maybe.
Okay, my last question for you, well, second to last question is, this is a very big cat thing. How does a salesperson succeed in a pandemic? Like, one of the things I love about you is that you will always prioritize being with a customer. And like that to me is every CRO, for the most part I've ever seen, will leave the go sell to the customers to the junior people, and they're inside in internal meetings all the time. And I always hated that. I was like, why are you, like, your job is to go network and tell the story and make the connection, not, be trapped in a bunch of internal meetings. And I think you've done that really well. But how does and my other observation, like, so just for people listening to this, like, I'll text Deirdre or call Deirdre, and you'll be like, I'm in Philadelphia. I'm in, like, I could clearly you're eager to go see people, and you're like, I'm going to go see our talent because we're the only place open. Yeah. But very long-winded way of asking, like, how does a salesperson succeed when you can't go see your customer if any part of your success is built on relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy year from that perspective. And I'd even say, like, sales leaders, how do they succeed? Because there's no playbook for this. Like, I sit every other Friday, I sit on a CRO council meeting that the IAB has pulled together. And it's people in my role across the industry, publishers, huge platforms, ad tech people, and everyone's got this challenge. One of the things I love is that we have a place where people are dying to get back to, for the most part. The people that don't want to or aren't comfortable aren't going to come, but so many of them are. And I just think that while we've been really effective over Zoom for the last year. The Zoom fatigue is setting in a very real way. And I don't think you can continue to be as successful as you've been for the last 8 to 12 months that way as going forward. I just think that we have to start to come out of that. So I think starting to find who are the customers that will go sit outside and have a lunch with you. Where are the places you can take a customer that they're comfortable? It is hard though, because a lot of them are on the other side of the table working for big companies, big agencies, and they're literally being told you can't have a meeting with a vendor. Making an interactive meeting more interesting, which again, that's getting harder and harder because everybody's thought of the happy hours and all the fun tricks and sending people cocktail kits and cute things like that is hard. It's kind of like been done already. So there's no magic bullet, but I just say, like, don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't assume that the people on the other end don't want to hear from you. They do. Everybody's moving forward as much as they can right now. And a lot of people are moving forward in really big ways. Like, I loved our multi-year partners because when the pandemic hit, it was like, not, are you going to stay with us? It was like, what can we do instead? What can we do now that wasn't what we were planning? But we've brought on brand new partners. What's funny is, like, we've never met a lot of them other than on a Zoom. So looking forward to meeting some of those partners as things open up. But I mean, put yourself out there, pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to reach out. Because there's a lot of activity happening. And I think a lot of people have been feeling uncomfortable. Like, is it insensitive to reach out to people right now? And I think the people who are pushing the envelope right now will emerge faster than the ones that are waiting for everything to get back to normal. It doesn't sound like things are getting 100% back to normal anytime soon. So don't wait for that.
Yeah, don't wait. That's a good theme. My last question for you is, if there's a young saleswoman or an assistant to somebody and they want your job, like, what's your advice to them?
A young saleswoman that wants my job?
Or just like, how did you get, like, what's your piece of advice for someone to be as successful as you've been, or to take a path that you've taken?
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is take risks. Always, don't be afraid to kind of get over your skis, be in a job that probably is a step ahead of where you were. Go convince people that you can do the job you want to do, and maybe start doing it before you ask for it is another one, depending on the kind of environment you work in. I've done both, where I've been like, okay, I might be the executive assistant to the VP of sales, but again, I'm going to jump into the sales contest and compete with some of the more seasoned sales reps in the business. And probably looked really immature and young at the time doing that, but was not afraid. And then also just like, there was opportunities that I went out and got. I went from being an account executive at ESPN to the SVP of sales at Rivals.com, which was like a little company based down in Nashville, Tennessee. And I was like, I can build your New York office. And that, obviously, it was crazy, but I did it, and we were very successful, and we sold to Yahoo. So I think it's really just not being afraid to take risks. And no one's going to tell you to do that, from where you're sitting. You have to, like, calculated risks as well. Like, know where you want to be. It sounds cliche, but know where you want to get to, and then find your own path there.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Thanks, Deirdre. That was great.
Thank you. This is awesome.
Let's go.